Hey guys, welcome back to Clownfish TV. This is Neon. I am here with Geeky Sparkles.
Hello.
It's already time for another daily dose of Dismal Disney. That's a double dose today.
Yes.
So we're going to talk about more criticism of Snow White, more criticism of Disney's handling of live action remakes. This is coming from Tim Rice, a very famous Disney lyricist.
Right. He's also worked, with Andrew Lloyd Webber on like Jesus Christ Superstar and stuff like that.
Oh, yeah.
And so, dude did the lyrics for like Aladdin and The Lion King. It's, well-known Disney icon.
Yes. So he, when he criticizes it, now, I mean, as if it wasn't enough to have the son of the director of the original Snow White coming out against it, but when you've got Tim Rice raising questions about the need for these live action remakes, you're doing something wrong.
Right. Now, he has some points about it that are good, and he also brings up some of the casting decisions and how he thinks it's fair. So, and he's not completely wrong. We'll talk about that too. So before we get into it any further.
Please subscribe for more pop culture news, views, and rants, guys. If you do, go get a woohoo.
Woohoo!
And
still sick, but I'm doing my best.
She's trying. So this is coming from piratesandprincesses.net. Go out and check out the article. And Geeky's going to run this one because she wrote the article, and I don't know what he said.
Yes, because I had to transcribe a lot of things. Okay, he did an interview on GB News, and apparently it was released today. He talked about his thoughts on the live-action remake of Snow White, live-action remakes in general, how characters are treated and how things like in a different time doesn't make them bad. They're from a different time period. He even talks about casting and why hiring Rachel Zegler, not because of the things she said, but because she's not white, might be okay, and if it was a good acting portrayal.
Right.
So here's what he said. I'm just going to go over it because it took me a long time to transcribe this. So during the interview, he was asked if he felt that live action remakes were what the public wants. And he explained that he did work a little bit on the Aladdin live action remake, but mostly he did a lot with The Lion King.
Yes.
But he also kept saying repeatedly he thinks the animated versions are better.
Yes.
He did say that a couple times. He said, I was very involved with songs from The Lion King, which was remade. I didn't think the live action so-called version worked as well as the cartoon, partly because it's extremely difficult to make animals, even though the whole thing is constructed and in a way was a sort of cartoon itself, but to make real-looking animals have expressions. It's almost impossible. And a lot of humor seemed to go from the film, I felt. Yeah. So they lost a lot of the humor in translation.
Yeah, it didn't work. I mean, it didn't work. Compared to the original, it seems very dead and,
Yeah, it just doesn't work. And he brings that up a lot. Like, they lose a lot because Disney keeps insisting on doing this. So then later he was talking about the history of Snow White, and he was saying, it came from the 1800s. It was a Grimm Brothers fairy tale. And then like in 1912, it ended up being like a Broadway play. And in like 1916, it ended up being like a silent film.
Yes.
And then it went on to be the 1938 Walt Disney classic, full featured animated film ever. What led to Disney today being what it is, it launched everything. He almost lost everything to make this because it was art. And it was so far advanced of anything else at its time. Like, it's so important. I can't express how important Snow White is to Disney today.
Yep.
Yeah, and they keep forgetting this.
They do.
They keep forgetting this. But he was talking about that, and then he's talking about, how it was from a different time, this led to this. And he said, the story, as I understand it, the new version of Snow White, the story is being changed so much. The characters are being changed. The dwarves are not all dwarves. And you think, well, why call it Snow White? Why call it a remake, Snow White? Why not just make a new film with an exciting new story? Oh my God, it's like what everybody else is saying.
Everybody else. In fact, we saw earlier today that the Mary Sue actually...
Oh, yes.
Continue without disabling. Now we're gonna block those ads from the Mary Sue and their one comment that they have. Yeah, it was interesting. They actually had a take on Disney princesses and said they're not so bad. They're not so bad. Now they did make sure they got to dig in
about woke men and how they hate
anti-woke men and whatever. But when they actually looked at the stories, it's like, no, these actually were empowering stories for their time. Time.
So I mean, even the Mary Sue saying that,
I know, right?
Okay, everybody's literally saying. I think everybody's united in thinking this movie should not exist. So then they're talking about, among this, he goes from talking about that to talking about the casting choices because, people have been upset, about the Rachel Zegler being, Rachel Zegler is more Latina and doesn't look like Snow White, who had skin as white as snow. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, Tim Rice doesn't believe that should really impact being cast, which is something we've said before. And I do agree with him on this, is the fact that we've mentioned this before. You shouldn't have to always play a character that you're represented by. So a gay person should only play gay characters. A straight person shouldn't always play straight characters. You should be allowed to play different things. Now, it's a little weird because her name's Snow White,
Weird.
So it is a little weird. But he has a valid point because he says, I think anybody, if you're an actor, should be able to play any part. And the only thing really that matters is whether the actor is good and right for the part. The only thing that really matters is, are they any good? Can they convince in the role? And I think that's what should apply to all Disney films as well. Do they work as movies?
Yeah.
So same idea, like, does this work as a film by itself? Is this the right actor? He went on to talk about how they do the Evita, and they've had different people from different races playing Evita because they were the best person for the role. Not looking at you, Madonna. But everybody else, they had other people that, were really good for the role, and they might not look like her, but they could portray the character well. And in that regard, we can't say on one hand, it's not fair that people are pigeonholed by, identity into what they can play. And then the other hand say, well, you can't play Snow White, except for the fact that she's literally described as skin as white as snow. It's a descriptor. But I mean, there is that point. If they're the right person, unfortunately, I do not think Rachel Zegler is the right person in any way, shape, or form.
She does not carry herself like a Disney princess. In fact, she bitches about having to wear the dress. Meanwhile, there are a lot of cast members at Disney World and Disneyland that would love to have a word with her, I'm sure, because they're getting paid a lot less to wear the dress.
They would love to play the part and probably would have done it flawlessly. And they're not getting the opportunity. Now, Gal Gadot, when you see her, she's always poised and carries herself graciously, and she knows when to not talk.
Yeah, Gal Gadot actually is a class act when it comes to handling PR. Like, I remember her doing the interview with Ezra Miller, and Ezra Miller was behaving like a nut. And Gal Gadot's just kind of like trying to save the conversation. Like, so let's go back to talking about the movie.
Yeah, she's always poised, and she's always like the adult in the room, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
you know? These people, like these young people who grew up at a time of social media, and they keep wanting to shoot their mouth off. And she's always there, like, like the mom trying to rein them back in, like, no, So she's always like a very class act, But so then they're talking, that led into the next part where he starts talking about how he feels that an old story should be left alone for something new. And at what point has the story been changed so much that is no longer recreating that story? And he says, if you start with a story that was written in 18 whatever, by Brothers Grimm, and you change it so much, you aren't really recreating a story. You're doing a new film, which may or may not be good.
Yes, that is it. I mean, they've changed so much. Since we're talking Disney, we'll talk Marvel, we'll talk WandaVision, we'll talk the Ship of Theseus. You start changing so many parts that it's no longer the original. It's
not anymore,
ship.
yeah.
Yeah, that's it.
That's good. Yeah. And then they're talking about, so the interviewer asked him what he felt they need to do to make our remakes more relevant to our culture today. And he said, yes, I think you have to take in the views of today, but you shouldn't be completely hidebound by them. I don't think, for example, the 1937 Snow White, for example, is now a bad film because it reflected its time. Yes. And it was sincerely made, and it was extraordinarily popular. And the actual fact that the character Snow White, he gets really animated for this, in that early film isn't just a cipher. She actually makes a few decisions, and she's a very good and nice person, meaning she has agency contrary to the narrative. Okay, if you can't do that again now, and why would you want to? Because it's already been done very well back in what seems like the Stone Age of cinema. And it's supposed to be and. My only question is really, why call it Snow White? Why not make a brand new film with an exciting story? Which perhaps is what they've done. I haven't seen it yet.
I highly doubt that. I think he has a good point. It's like, look, these Disney films are classics for a reason. And at this point, they're only remaking them. It's a cynical cash grab. There is no reason to remake The Lion King. There's no reason to make it other than to make $1 billion at the box office.
Right, it's about money. But they're getting dwindling returns with each and every outing.
Because they're not good.
They're not good, and people aren't interested.
No.
And then he said that he went to see The Little Mermaid. And he talked about going to see The Little Mermaid. I didn't transcribe all of that. But he did say that he felt that it lost some of its it lost some of the excitement and enchantment of the original. He thought it had good parts, but it just was not the same level. Now, he admits he prefers the animated versions.
Yeah, there's so much more emotion that you can pull from animated characters than
and some things just don't translate.
Some things don't translate. When you're dealing with a bunch of singing and dancing fish, it's kind of hard. And The Lion King, like I said, the biggest turnoff in The Lion King is one of my favorite Disney movies, hands down. And the original is such a masterpiece, and it wasn't supposed to be. It was actually the B team worked on The Lion King. Mm-hmm. But how lively the original movie is. And then you look at the remake and it just looks static and dead and just very
It's too Uncanny Valley.
Yeah, it just does not work. I mean, compare like the death of Mufasa. Spoiler, Mufasa dies. Compare the death of Mufasa and somebody had it side by side and you can see the emotion as he's hurtling to his death, right? But in the live action version, if you can call it live action, it looks ridiculous. It just looks like it's a ragdoll CGI cat falling off a cliff, like, meow.
Yeah. He said, if a cartoon works brilliantly, like The Little Mermaid did, or even how Snow White did back in 1937, when even I wasn't around, it's often a mistake to try and redo it.
Yes.
But remakes can work. I think the Aladdin remake worked pretty well. But he also is very critical. So, I mean, for him to say that, he must think it really did. I haven't watched it.
He's being very careful what he says because he knows Disney signs a lot of his checks. And
but he's still bringing it. Like, he's still saying, like,
well,
and
he's old enough to not care.
And then this is what got me. He just goes on, but he does it in a nice way. He talks about how, especially in modern era, since the Disney Renaissance at least, you have a lot of strong female characters. There's been like a lot of princesses. They're usually a strong female character. And he said, you have to go back quite a long way to have an excuse to criticize a film for being unfair to women. I think Disney films, whether good or not, have done women justice.
Ooh.
Mm-hmm. At least he's talking about the modern films. He's like, you have to go back a long time to find something to be mad about. And they're still redoing all the new ones. Like, they're going to redo Moana. They're doing Lilo and Stitch. They're doing...
Yeah, I mean, Moana just came out. It's only been, like 7 or 8 years? Not even.
Yeah, and that's one of the main complaints people have had. They're like, well, if you're going to do these movies as live action, do ones that were like, there's that time frame and then like the late 90s that they kind of went under the radar, early 2000s that they kind of slipped through and people didn't notice them. Like Atlantis or Tarzan. They are doing Hercules. Some of those, do the ones that people like, didn't really go see. So it's not like, you can do that and probably get away with it more because they're not as well known or beloved as some of the more modern ones.
But the problem is because they're not so well known, they don't have the brand recognition, which means people aren't going to go see Treasure Planet.
Yeah, but those would work so much better as live action. Like, I mean, I think not necessarily better, but like I think like Atlantis in live action would be done right, could be amazing.
Atlantis and Treasure Planet, you could tell it was almost written to be a live action movie, but they went with animation. Like they could have been live action.
Yeah, those two especially, I think could really. I mean, depending on how much they put the money into it,
they would have to put the money into it
to make, especially Treasure Planet. No, Atlantis too. They could be really, really, really well done. And those aren't the ones they're focusing on. They're focusing on doing Moana again. I'm like, you just did Moana a few years ago. You don't need to do Moana again.
Yeah, they do because money.
Yeah, but it's not working because people are getting so tired of your lazy ass shit. They're getting sick of it. They're like, if it's already done brilliantly, don't do it again. You don't need to redo it. Do something new.
They can't. Disney can't make new things. They're done making new things. All the people that make
new things, but when they make new things, they suck. And then no one goes to them and they're like, well, we gave you something new and you hated it. But then you have Encanto, which is really well done. Coco, amazing. They can do good things when they want to.
A lot of the people that worked on those movies have moved on. A lot of them have gone elsewhere. They've left. Disney has a massive brain drain. That is their biggest problem right now, is that they're incapable. This is supposed to be Disney. They're supposed to constantly have new ideas, good ideas, and they can't do it. They can't do it anymore. They don't have the people to do it. The wrong people.
Well, they had people in there. They do have people that are creative. They kept tying their hands together, but they couldn't do anything.
Well, yeah.
Like, either they took power away from them or they weren't allowed to make decisions anymore.
You have to go through the DEI hurdles
right.
to get
I think
anything
that's
done.
a lot of it. and they're allowed to make decisions. And now, you know, and you think with the dawn of Disney Plus, that would be the ultimate time. And they were doing things like they had like the shorts that were done by the people at Pixar. They were allowed to do their own shorts, and some of them were really creative and cool, and they gave them a chance. But that's because they wanted content for Disney Plus.
Yeah.
And it's just like these live action remakes aren't it. They hit originally because it was novel and fun, and you keep cranking them out. They're not doing well because you put either the wrong people in as actors or the wrong people in as directors, or you try to triple down on changing it for agenda's sake for no darn good reason other than I have to because representation. And then you don't do well. It's a double shithole for the people that you're supposed to be changing it to, because now everybody's like, you know, they won't.
What is a double shithole?
Well,
is that a medical condition?
It's Disney.
Is that a medical condition?
It is. I mean, I'm sure some people have double shithole.
I pushed so hard. I have a double shithole.
That can happen, but that's a whole other story.
Oh God.
It's better than being a prolapse shithole. I mean, you know, but I'm just saying, Disney, you know, they keep doing this, and what happens is the takeaway isn't that we could have done something new with diverse cast that would have been organically diverse. No, takeaway is, oh, people don't like diversity, and then you try to turn around, call your audience a bunch of names. People are over it. They're done with it. They're tired of it. They don't want it. And then when you have Rachel Zegler out there making comments, like, granted, she hasn't been doing that so much recently, but she had been. And at this point, everybody's united in thinking that she ain't it.
No, she ain't it.
And this is probably something you should cancel, but they're not gonna.
Nope. That's too far along. I think if it had
they already announced the release date, they're not going to cancel it now.
Yeah, I think it's. I'm sure principal photography is probably in the can at this point. And
oh yeah, I would hope.
Yeah, and if they were going to cancel it, they would have. I mean, my God,
I think they have too much money sunk into it because it's been delayed. How many times with the set burned down?
I know, right?
The PR alone, what they're spending on PR damage control. I'm sure they have to make some money back. I guess somebody's better than no money.
God.
But you can see the full interview. If you go to piratesofprincesses.net, the full interview is linked on there on YouTube. I did transcribe a lot of it, so you can find it on there and watch it in its entirety, because not everything was I brought over to the article, but most of the important things I did.
Yeah, their title is Disney tarnishing the legacy of the originals. Wow, that's pretty harsh. That's coming from Tim Rice. That is harsh.
I mean, he didn't say that. That's what the people. He's very careful how he said it, but I did find it interesting that when he was talking about Snow White and he was talking about her character, you could tell he was shoving it in there, but he was like, you know, she's more than just, you know, a cipher, he said, more than just like a placeholder. She had made choices and she was a good person. You could tell she was a very good person. And I think he's annoyed that they keep insisting that she's a non-person. Yeah. She was non-personed in this movie, which isn't true.
Well, even the Mary freaking Sue pointed out that Snow White actually had some good character traits, and all these early Disney princesses that everybody likes to point to and be like, you know, look how
but
submissive
they start out with, she's been disproportionately harassed.
Okay, well,
no bullshit. She was not. She had that coming.
Yeah,
she's basically like, oh my God, guys, like it's so stupid. I mean, it's just so dated, and like, you know, I'm just so sick by watching it. Even though I loved it as a child, and I can't wait to represent the character. I mean, even Halle Bailey said that she like Little Mermaid, and you could tell whether you like whether or not you like her portrayal of the character, you could tell she actually cared about the movie and the character, and she legitimately liked the character, and it was like meant something to her, and you could tell that.
Yeah, that was. I mean, that's like a night and day difference. I mean, Zegler loathes Snow White. She loathes Disney princesses. She's made comments about having to be stuck in a Disney princess costume, and Halle Bailey is like, I'm really honored.
She embraced it.
She did. She was out there like, you know, I love Little Mermaid. I watched it all the time growing up, and it means a lot to me, and I'm going to do the best job I can do.
She even showed up to all the premieres in outfits that were inspired by the movie. Now, some of them, I think, were very plunging necklines for a kid's movie, but, you know, she kept trying to at least make her, like, it was like kind of like...
at least it wasn't seashells.
Yeah, well, I think the one was, but I think that had... But like Margot Robbie kept showing up to all the Barbie premieres in different Barbie-inspired outfits over the decades. And I think that's cool because you could tell that you're really putting thought into it and it mattered to you. And all she's doing is going up on stage and like talking about like, oh my God, like the princess is a stalker. And fairest of them all means be the best leader, not how pretty you are. And like, it's so toxic. Oh my God.
She is damn lucky to be there because the other two big movies she was in, both of them were bombs.
Well, Shazam, she was talking about basically she just needed a job. She's like, I was like, call me because like I really needed a job.
She's gonna be washed up by the time she's 30. She's like 22 years old.
She was a high school kid who auditioned for West Side Story and got the role, and that's what started this whole thing.
Well, send her back to school because she needs to learn a few things.
I think it's just a matter of age, and like again, brought this up before. It's a generational thing. I mean, even our kids are smarter than this. But it's a generational thing where like they're raised on social media and they're raised with being able to say whatever you want to say, and usually you can do it without people knowing who you are.
You get upvotes for it.
And when it's all about was that one Millennialopoly, and it was like about your upvotes instead of money. It's like that, except for it's not millennials, obviously. And it's this whole culture and mentality, and they don't understand that they can see you. Now they know who's saying it. It's not like it's anonymous anymore.
And it's not just costing you cred, it's costing Disney millions, possibly billions of dollars, because people are going to look at this and be like, if you're dissing Snow White, and that is like the foundation of, God, look at all the ads, the foundation of modern Disney, then you are lost. This company is just completely lost.
Yeah.
So we're going to wrap this up.
Yep.
I can't even with all the ads. Oh my God.
Yeah, see, she was cast out right out of high school.
Okay. Yeah. I think she needs to go back. She needs to go back and learn a few things. We're going to wrap it up.
Yep.
Please subscribe for more pop culture news, views, and rants, guys. We'll talk later.
Bye.
Help support the channel. Go to thereef.support and get early access to podcasts, videos, and other content. That's thereef.support.